Welcome to Leadership Lessons from the Fastlane, brought to you by the Washington Speakers Bureau. In this space, we will explore some of the most pressing challenges that leaders face today with the world's most respected, innovative, curious, and accomplished thought leaders. We'd like to welcome our host, best-selling author and co-author of the recently published book, Choose Love, Not Fear, a WSB exclusive speaker for almost 30 years, Gary Heil.
This is Leadership Lessons from the Fastlane. I'm Gary Heil. Today, I'm excited to have Tom Peters with us. Tom is an author, an educator, a once-in-a-generation communicator, and has deservedly been named one of the top 50 business thinkers on the planet. His first book, In Search of Excellence, not only changed what it meant to be a business book, it changed the dialogue about excellence for the next half century. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that for the last 4 decades, Tom has been the most curious, most passionate, most inspiring advocate for finding a better way to lead inspired teams. So much so that I must confess that he inspired many of us, me included, to drop what we were doing. That wasn't so hard, Tom, in my case, because I was a lawyer, to chase with him different ways of finding and building more inspired teams that are both more effective and more human. Tom, thank you for that. Welcome and great to see you again.
Well, feel free to keep going with that introduction. It's probably the most extraordinary thing, and the fact that it's a total crock is, thank.
It's not a crock in my case, and I do thank you for it. Tom, I've been waiting to ask you for some time. $16 billion a year we spend trying to create better leaders. Lots of good ideas out there in the last half a century. Decades of research showing that being more human helps in more human organizations. And maybe you said it best in Excellence Now, when you talked about extreme humanism, when you said that you were frustrated by the lack of an excellence revolution. I think we can all join you in that. Why has it been so hard, Tom, for this half a century, but preaching the gospel, but it doesn't seem like we're resonating as fast as we'd hoped?
Well, I want to begin by copping out. In the United States, most of our writing and pontificating more or less focuses on the Fortune 500. And the statistical reality is that 6% of Americans work for the Fortune 500 and 94% don't. I'm one of the guilty parties who talked about the Fortune 500 people and this guy and that guy, and occasionally this woman and that woman. But the magic is in the SMEs, the small and the medium-sized enterprises. And I don't know whether it's listening to you and me, Gary, or whatever it's from, but you really find aces down there. Just amazing people doing amazing things. And we did something on this guy called Larry Janeski, and he's in Connecticut, Seymour, Connecticut, I think, and he runs a company called Basement Systems, Inc. I mean, good God, what does that mean? Well, it means that he gets mold out of people's basements, which allows them to take the basement and turn it into a rec room or turn it into an extra bedroom or what have you. The last time I heard, the company was over $100 million, but there was my old buddy who was a co-founder of Fast Company, Bill Taylor, wrote a book called Small Giants, or was that Bo Burlingham? There are a few, I got it wrong, but Bo Burlingham and Bill Taylor, fabulous books on incredible mid-sized businesses. So I don't know, whether it's because of me or people like me, but there are a hell of a lot of people who do it right.
No, and it is interesting though that Doug McGregor at MIT 70 years ago said that the technology is going to shift the power in this whole thing. And the time is coming, he said in the late 1950s, that leaders wouldn't have a choice at any level in any size business because employees, people would demand better. And when you look at Gen Z these days and the quote unquote difficulty in leading Gen Z people, I mean, they're changing the way we look at video, the TikTok generation. They're changing how we read. They're changing how we get news. They're staying on average in their jobs two years and 3 months. They want more mission. They want more authenticity. They care about values more. Is there any chance, Tom, in your mind that with Gen Z coming up, that they're going to force every size business to be different?
Your argument holds a lot of water. There's no question. And you don't want to get into why I walk around with a frown on my face 24 and a half hours every day. I just think there is so much downside to social media, the ability to get people pitted, P-I-T-T-E-D, more and more against each other. So there's a real force on the other side that I find terrifying. But in general, I think your argument is correct. And I think it's a wonderful argument and a wonderful thing in the sense that leaders are not going to have any option other than to be thoughtful and pay attention, to the people who are working with them, for them, with them is a better term than for them, short-termers or long-termers. So I can see the good news. There's no question about that. But it's pretty messy out there right now. Zuckerberg admits that Facebook is designed to increase hatred because hatred increases hits. I mean, the words I would like to say after having uttered those words, come out of what I learned to say when I was in the Navy 45 years ago. It's horrible. But yeah, your fundamental point would seem to be true.
Well, I mean, when you wrote Extreme Humanism, right? And it what's really interesting about it, you say, quote, excellence it's not an aspiration, it's a way of life. I'm thinking you mean in that too, that extreme humanism is not an aspiration, it's a way of life. Either we care deeply about people or we don't. Isn't that the case?
Absolutely. And in my last book, The Excellence Dividend, 2 or 3 years ago, I said excellence is the next 5 minutes. It is not an aspiration. It is not a hill to climb. It is the next conversation that Tom and Gary, Tom the boss and Gary the not boss, or Gary the boss and Tom the not boss, the passing conversation. And one thing in these last couple of years, because I was skeptical as hell, and this gets back to your prior question, you can have intimacy via Zoom or other technological things. We can become pretty good buddies. And I read some of the crap that says, well, people these days don't want to be friends. They want, first of all, I think it's bullshit. It's part of human nature. And secondly, I think, which I think is a different way of saying what you said, I think it could be one of the 7 wonders of the world if bosses learned, which is your point, the degree to which they really have to be much more thoughtful in a Zoom world. I think there's hope, or there's a chance, or what have you. I mean, I was fascinated myself because I started doing Zoom conferences, podcasts, and so on, and I kind of assumed, even though I've been a public speaker, I kind of assumed that you couldn't have the intimacy when you're staring at a screen and I'm staring at a screen. And I think that's total bullshit. The reality is we can't go out and have a beer immediately thereafter. But I did, when the pandemic started, my wife is occasionally a textile weaver. And so she and a whole bunch of buddies started doing face masks. And I was sitting in my office and I thought, well, you're supposed to be such a hot shit. What are you doing? Sitting on your ass in your office. And so my colleague, Shelley Dolly, went around to pretty much everybody we had talked to and said, Tom would like to talk about leadership in the times of COVID-19, which was, gutsy on my part because I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But I did this thing, which is actually on the first page of Extreme Humanism. I don't know where it came from. And I called it the COVID-19 Leadership 7. Be kind, be caring, be patient, be forgiving, be positive, be present, walk in the other person's shoes. And I was raised a Presbyterian, but I don't darken the church every Sunday, to put it mildly. So it's not a religious thing. But here's my example that I actually kind of stole this from somebody. I'm a boss, and we have a whole bunch of Zoom meetings in the team of 25 or whatever in the course of a week, whatever it is. And Mary Smith, on time for every single one of them, contributes to every single one of them. And now Mary and I are having an informal conversation or an evaluation conversation. And I say, Mary, I got a problem with you. And my problem is that I know you have 3 kids, and I know that your mom is in an assisted living place. Please stop being on time. Please stop being attentive. First, colleagues first. And I said, it's great. You're fabulous. You're an amazing contributor. Obviously, I'm going to give you an A+ evaluation, but please do me a favor. Please be late next week sometime. But, I think that's kind of the right attitude. And people say people shouldn't screw around with other people's personal lives. That's total crap. Years ago, there was an Army general by the name of Melvin Zace, and he gave a speech to the Army War College senior officers on leadership. And he went blah, 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 blah. And he said, to enhance your self-worth, to enhance the groups you're with, there is one and only one piece of advice that I can give you. And it's advice that everyone can follow. You must care. And, I use it in every book. And about 10 years later, I grew up in Annapolis. I was, to my great selfish, egocentric delight, invited to come down to the Naval Academy and give the annual Forrestal lecture. And Forrestal was the first Secretary of Defense, blah, 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 blah. I think we had 4,000 or 5,000 midshipmen in a very big room. And I felt so strongly about this Zace thing. And, I was making a lot of speeches, and thanks to my speakers bureau, the Washington Speakers Bureau, I was, coining the bucks. This is the age of cassette tapes. I gave 5,000 cassette tapes away at the end of that speech, and it was to every midshipman, and it was a cassette taped recording of Zace's remarks. I felt that strongly about it. And oh my God, you wouldn't believe over the years the feedback I got from it.
Tom, it is a little disconcerting and euphoric in the same way that being nice, having a relationship would be seen as a novel kind of leadership activity. I mean, it's like, it's human organization. You're human. Being nice is a way of life. It is who you are. It's not a tactic. You're not nice because you want something. You're nice because that's who you are, isn't it?
Yeah. In Extreme Humanism, I quoted a guy whose name is simple, but I can't remember, who runs a biotech company. And he said, we only hire nice people. Because if I want a culture that's supportive, we only hire, and he said pointedly, he said, half of the jobs in places like research and development, you won't understand the name of the job, let alone the contents. But he said, find that weird, crazy degree. And he said, I'll tell you what, across the country or the world, there are a lot of people who have that degree. Don't hire the jerks. And the other part, which I love, is you're the boss, and you have an interview with me for this company. And oh my God, love it. First or second sight, I am obviously the smartest person you've ever met. I'm just an amazing human being. And you're the CEO and co-founder, and you're desperate to hire me, but you can't. The rule is that after our conversation, I have to have, I think the number was 7, it doesn't really matter exactly. I've got to have 7 interviews with people from around the company. And one of them may be a biotech science guy, but one of them may be a junior person in the finance department. One of them may be, in ye olde days, a receptionist. And every single one of those, including the most junior person who is interviewing me, can say, nope, we're not going to hire him. I got to tell you one more story like that I just love so much. Every darn list you see typically has Mayo Clinic at the top for best healthcare performers. And a couple of people I know, I'm getting old, Gary, I don't remember their damn names, damn it, wrote a wonderful book called The Management Lessons from Mayo Clinic. And the one I loved in this whole 300-page book that was quite good was in this. Well, I'll be the potential bad guy again instead of making you the bad guy. You're interviewing me for a job in neurosurgery, and I've got a reputation as tall as Mount Rushmore. What I don't know as the interviewee is that surgeon interviewee is that during the interview, you are literally, not figuratively, counting the number of times that I use the word we and the number of times that I use the word I. And if the I's beat the we's, Mr. Hotshit, IQ of 723, you're not going to get hired. And it sounds gimmicky, except it actually goes back to Dr. Mayo in 1914, who developed the idea of team medicine. Surgeons helping each other out and so on. And in the average hospital, unfortunately, there's a lot of egocentrism, and that doesn't always happen. But it's the we, I stuff that's the nice stuff. There are ways to do this, but if you want to have a nice organization, don't let unnice people in the door.
Well, it's
brutal.
It's funny you say that, Tom. I was not that long ago, I was in a group, and it grates on your ears after a while, the I, we stuff. So the one I hate for me is when people say my people, because I'm always like, you don't own them. What is that, right? And I got frustrated with the guy one day, and he's saying my people, and I said, you own them? He says, that's just vocabulary stuff. And I said, well, tell me, who are your people? He says, the ones I control versus the ones I don't control. I said, I'm beginning to understand. So I think the pronoun stuff is not all wrong.
I think it is all powerful. It is not a trick. It is not a gimmick. It is not a good management idea. It is not a tactic. It is the fundamentals of being a decent human being. What I wrote in the Extreme Humanism book, and I believe I said, being a leader is the highest possible human aspiration. Your entire job is to help throughout your career the growth and development of those who happen to be, quote unquote, working for you at the time. There was this great thing. I was giving a speech in India, and sitting 20 feet away from me in a uniform, and the number of stars on the uniform kind of blinded your reflection, was a guy who runs the Indian Army, the general who runs the Indian Army, which incidentally, in terms of warm bodies, is the biggest in the world, 1.2 million people, I think it is. At any rate, we got into a discussion when I raised some point, and he said, when I'm trying to decide, when I've got an open position for somebody to become a 2-star general or somebody to become a general, there's only one thing I really look at, and Gary Heil is one of the candidates. I go dig deep to find out the degree of success that the people who worked for him had after they left him. Not what they did for him, but who are the ones whose career took a leap, jump, whatever, and they can really, you've had those kinds of leaders, so have I on occasion, and they literally grew like crazy in 18 months or maybe even 6 months as a result of having been around Gary. And I thought that was beautiful. I've heard a similar thing before, but coming out of the mouth of this guy with 87 stars on both shoulders, really hit me between the eyes.
And it's interesting when you say in Extreme Humanism, you talk about the greatest responsibility we have is as a leader to increase the success of the people that work with us. It's really interesting then how important our hiring practices are, to your point. because there are people who just shouldn't work for the company that don't care,
Yep.
right? And there are people who aren't nice people who aren't going to be more human no matter what they are. I was in a little company, to your point, a great smallish company not long ago, and the CEO looked at me and says, you know, my hiring technique is pretty thing. They've got to be smart enough to do the job, but I only want to hang out with nice people. That's all I want to hang out with. I don't want to hang. I look at them and say, do I want to hang out with you 8 hours a day?
Yep. No, I think that is absolutely beautiful, to the point. If in our whole conversation people just took that one away, it would have been worth their time times 1,000. There's a book. In this instance, I don't remember either the name of the book or the author, but he said, which is what you just said, hiring is the most significant practice that a leader has, and virtually nobody has been trained in it. And I think that's right. It's not that they haven't been trained a little. They haven't frigging been trained in hiring at all. And that really is a disgrace.
And Tom, it goes to your
opportunity.
Yeah, it goes to your, in some ways, it goes to your soft is hard and hard is soft kind of analogy, which is what they have been trained in is reading resumes and online applications. The soft stuff, are you a nice person? Can you think on your feet? Do you get along with others? Are you a good teammate? Aren't necessarily, can you independently think? I mean, one of the problems with having 10 people interview me, if anybody has an objection, they give me the black ball and I'm out. But the problem comes is that if I'm a novel thinker, somebody's going to have an objection.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could not agree more wholeheartedly. Well, we got that one solved, Gary.
Hardly, we've already done it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if literally you and I in this conversation could affect 5 people, cause 5 people to dramatically rethink their hiring process, it would have been one of the best half hours of our life.
No, I totally agree, Tom. I totally agree. And the idea that our vocabularies are a window to our soul around the idea of I and we and all. I loved your note and I wanted to know more about Menlo innovation with the idea that joy is why we exist. I don't know why we think words like love and the Thomas Aquinas thing, meaning the wishing the good for others, right? Or joy, are seen as soft, when in fact it's the basic human instinct for which we live, right? And I thought that was a great part of extreme humanism, was the fact that we talk about joy and love and stuff like that. Those are really hard words, aren't they, when it comes to hiring a team?
I think they are. And I think that's what our conversation has been about. That's not the mindset that people bring to things. I've had some discussions. I use Twitter a lot on Twitter, and I got into a discussion a couple times, but this work team is not my family. Don't use the word family around me. And I said, well, I'm looking at it mathematically. Unless you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you will spend more of your adult working hours at your job than you will with your beloved family. And my rude addition to that is, if you piss away the work hours, you pissed away your life quantitatively. And I think it's really true. Like anything else, it can be taken too far. I mean, there was another thing on Twitter about, people don't want friends at work. What? Utter bullshit. I don't know. I don't know why the hell we have to have this damn conversation, Gary. We have spoken nothing. I said to somebody, I said, here's the deal. I'm as greedy as the next person. I want you to buy all 20 of my books so I can get the royalty 20 times over. But I said, here's the dirty little secret. Don't tell anybody. I've said what I said in the first book 19 more times, just used slight different language. And it's really true. And I said, and here's the second part of it. If you want to understand my book, you are going to have to show me a signed certificate of graduation from the 4th grade, because there is nothing in it that even borders on sophistication. It's that be thoughtful, be kind, be caring. And this is one of those win-win situations where it makes everything better, for God's sakes. And as I said, why the hell we have to have this conversation, I don't know. But we both know.
Well, I'm going to give a little hypothesis for you to chew on for a second, okay? Why we have to have it. I was in a conversation with a different business owner the other day, and he's talking about, well, if I didn't have that supervision, who would babysit the people running my retail outlet? And my ears were grating to beat the band. I'm about to jump out the window. And all I can think of is the mindset that thinks I'm pretty good, but I don't really trust everybody else very much. If I don't trust anybody, I'm going to create an organization like a big company creates, because there is very little real trust. Do you disagree with that, Tom, or not? Because when I see these things, I'm flabbergasted by how sometimes I can get somebody to articulate their real mindset, which scares me.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a piece for the Financial Times, I don't know, it was 8 or 9 months ago, and it was ripping apart my former employer, McKinsey and Company, for their despicable behavior with Purdue Pharma. But I kind of went in the direction of what you just said. And I said, well, I've got one answer for starters: close every business school. And, it's silly, it's stupid, but I don't disbelieve it. The reality is, and it's just what you said, I have a PhD in organizational behavior from a business school. When kids come to business school, the only damn thing they want, my thesis advisor said, only thing they want is more marketing and more finance. And they look at that people stuff as, soft shit, what you just said. Soft is hard, hard is soft. Well, the real thing is that is I could have written the article, and I may have said this, it is true of all the professional schools: medicine, business, engineering. They focus on the hard stuff and don't focus in any way, shape, or form on the soft stuff. Again, let's not be pessimistic. My name is not Mr. Robbins. When Anthony Robbins goes into an auditorium of 1,000 people, he expects, I really believe this, to change 1,000 lives. When I go into an auditorium of 700 people and 3 of them walk away with determination to look at the world a little differently, I think I have had one hell of a good day. So it's kind of back to the giant companies and the small company things that we started back we're not going to change the world, but we can be helpful to a few people who will create better environments around us. And maybe my aim is too low, but to me, that's the essence of it.
And I'm with you, Tom. That's the realistic part of it, if it sticks. And God knows you have done that for many of us in that. Talk to me for a second about the perils of over supervision, which is where I want to get to with that. I mean, I do know when we had the quality movement and we did increase quality by a ton, we increased spans of control by 4 and 5 and 6x. And that this idea that everybody needs a supervisor, people are brighter than sometimes and tougher than we give them credit for. Tell me about the perils in your mind of over supervision.
I think that's what our whole conversation has been about. But one of my best professors at Stanford in organizational behavior wrote a book that said, but we do need some kind of hierarchy. And I'm a civil engineer, and I said to somebody, listen, I believe all this stuff I talk about, but I don't want to drive across a bridge that didn't have a project manager on the team. So I won't go as far as anarchy is good. It's a much longer and more complicated conversation, obviously, than we have time for. I think, back to what we've been saying, it is the quality of the leader. And you know, going back to a couple of things I've said, you've reinforced, focusing on the we people is the best way to build a great bridge. It's the best way to help humanity. It's the best way to help people. You know, I think we could, you said it, that, you know, the term that bugs you the most in the world maybe is my people, da, 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 da. And I do think we need to pay attention to the language. I think I feel strongly about it as you do, but it doesn't mean that the alternative is anarchy. And sometimes I read stuff that kind of says anarchy, and, you know, no, that, you know, the two great forces, people who guided my life were, number one, my mother, and number two, my commanding officer at U.S. Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 9 in Vietnam in 1966 and 1967. Captain Anderson, Richard E. Anderson. He was tough. He wanted us to get the job done, and he insisted on it. He was loved by his sailors because every one of them knew that he cared about them. You know, it's the way he spent his time. It's the way, here's the, you know, this is a story I love. The day before D-Day, the head of the British troops, Field Marshal Montgomery, it is said, gave one of the greatest motivational speeches that's ever been given. The head of the whole shebang, who was a boy from Kansas by the name of Dwight David Eisenhower, General Eisenhower apparently went down to the beach and he walked among the troops and he put an arm around the private first class from Podunk, Nevada, and just pat him. Might not even say anything, just give him a pat on the shoulder. And, you know, that to me, I mean, you know, Montgomery's troops did, I guess, just fine when they hit the beach, but that to me is the most, as perfect a definition of leadership as I've ever heard. Not one word uttered, but you walk away from it. And that was the way with, you know, with Captain Anderson. He wanted the job done. He wanted it done well. He wanted it done quickly. But he cared that each one of us grow, be human to each other, you know, and so on. If you're thoughtful, it doesn't have to be driven by any morality or what have you. It works. You know, I had a friend who was in charge of a project, nonprofit, and she was having all kinds of problems. And I said to her, I said, why don't you just write some thank you notes to people? You know, just every day, jot a couple of thank you notes down. And I said, don't do it because you believe in God. Do it because you want the team to work better. Be a hard ass about writing thank you notes. And what happened, and I'd seen it before, is she started writing thank you notes. The response was over the moon, and she became just what I thought. She became addicted to it. You know, and so I don't care. You know, it's just that I'm just so, you know, I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, and I've got a lot of problems with the South. But one thing I don't have problems with is good manners. Tends to be a little bit better below the Mason-Dixon line than it does up here in Massachusetts. And the number one thing my mother taught me was good manners. And, you know, it's people just, I don't know, you know, it's kind of who I am and what I do. But, you know, I was in the grocery store the other day, and there was a woman who was having a tough time driving one of those automated vehicles. And I went up to her and I said, you know, your picture's familiar, your face is familiar to me. I said, I just saw a picture of you in the post office. Is one of the most 10 wanted people in the United States. And it was for all the damn speeding tickets you have gotten in the grocery stores for racing that machine. I mean, she honestly, obviously tone of voice and everything, but I made her day. I'm not trying to brag on myself, but what I'm saying is just a little touch like that, just a little piece of thoughtfulness, just a smile at the right time is I mean, it works. It's a good thing to do. It'll get you into heaven, and comma, it works.
Tom, I'm going to add one caveat to it though. It works because it's genuine, right?
Yeah.
I love what you said recently about management by wandering around. I have seen more people try to wander around and come across like, Attila the Hun, not because they want to, because they think it's a tactic. And I've seen the one person I can think of who's brilliant at it because he walked around because he loved meeting people and couldn't wait to make a difference in their lives. But the difference is night and day, isn't it? And you made her day because
I totally agree. I think if you start doing it, the response will be so good that you'll keep it up, which I said a minute ago about my thank you. But you've seen it, I've seen it, it's what you're referring to. It's MBWA as wanting to get to know Gary better, and it's MBWA followed. I mean, here's another one of those little stories. I think it was Vicksburg, which was a great Union victory during the Civil War. Battle is over. The defeated Confederates are lined up down the road for a couple of miles. General Grant is on his horse, and a bunch of senior officers and colonels are ahead of him, and none of the colonels even bothered to look at the soldiers. Grant gets to the beginning of the 2-mile line of Confederate soldiers. He takes off his hat and rode the entire 2 frigging miles with his hat off as a mark of respect. And in particular, because it was a civil war and he knew that the time would come when we needed to be reintegrated. But I mean, that just, to me, says 1,000 words. I mean, maybe also that, between he and Eisenhower, we shouldn't have any leaders who didn't come from the Middle West. That my favorite one-liner about that is Chicago is New York without the attitude. It's a wonderful line, but it's not entirely a throwaway line. There is a gentleness to the average Midwesterner,
and the humanness of what it is in your book, Extreme Humanism. Really, everything we've talked about today, and we could talk for hours, really comes down to your thing that says it is not a tactic, it is not just an aspiration, but being caring and being good with people and being excellence is who you are. It's not your values, it is who you are. Isn't that the gist? Did I get the right part of the book?
I quoted in my last 2 books the New York Times columnist David Brooks, and he wrote a column in which he contrasted resume virtues and eulogy virtues. He said the resume virtues are, Gary's been promoted 7 times. He graduated from Princeton magna cum laude or whatever kind of laude it is, and then went on to do this and what to do that. Eulogy virtues, to state the obvious, are what they say about Gary at his funeral. And at his funeral, the only thing they talk about is how he was with other people. And my smart-ass version of that, and I don't give PowerPoint speeches these days, but I had a PowerPoint slide and it had a tombstone. And it said, Joe T. Smith, $17,364,219.18 net worth on the day that he died and the market closed. I ain't never seen a tombstone with net worth on it, and doubt that I will.
No, and I think even in the simplest of terms, that as you've taught us all in a way, that when you talk to somebody who worked for a good leader and you have a beer with them 5 years after they've left, they don't talk about we were above average in EPS every one of the years we worked. They talked about caring and development and education and wisdom, not the other. Two quick questions for you, Tom. What are you reading these days?
There's a wonderful book that talk about what I've read. I'll reverse myself. Called Compassionomics, written by a couple of MD researchers. And basically it says, I love the title of the book because it's really a crappy word, but it's the sort of thing that even an accountant could read if it's called compassion. And it's all about what you just said. It is the value of thoughtfulness. I mean, the book, these guys are hard-nosed researchers. And one little example, and I'm pretty sure I've got the number right, 37 seconds of continuous eye contact between the doctor and a patient cuts complications by 40%, cuts hospital stays by 30%, and it doesn't happen in today's healthcare world. 37 freaking seconds of Gary and Tom just looking each other in the eye like human beings. And again, my earlier point, not to beat the dead horse, not what they teach you in med school. My colleague with whom I am writing another book, Nancy Green, who's a designer, one of the best in the world, she was the one who put the humanism into the cover of the book. Because I had used the word, I had used the idea, and I had said humanistic. And she said, no. Humanistic is manipulative. It's humanism. And, I've, in the best sense of the word, fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. And one thing we haven't said, I hope we've implied it. In my opinion, it is also beyond a shadow of a doubt the best way to deal with the technology tsunami, which is embracing us. There is room for good behavior. There is room for fabulous products that change the world. And I believe that those who follow this path of humanism and hopefully extreme humanism have a better shot of landing on top. Though, the advanced AI, God knows where it's going to be 20 years from now. Makes me glad I'm 79.
The last question I would ask, and I think you've already answered it, Tom, which is if I were a Gen Z person and I grabbed you aside and said all the wisdom that you've gotten all these years and what you've seen, what's the one piece of advice you would give me? What would you tell me at 25 that would help me? One piece of advice.
The one piece of advice happens to be the exact words that General Zais used. And he said, you must care. You must care. And thoughtfulness, caring, decency, and of course, as you and I both know, I hope we do, I hope we behave appropriately most of the time. It's the world's #1 sucker play because you feel better than even the person you're talking to.
Well, it's certainly true. I can't argue with that. I was one time a cardiologist was telling me, you want to lower your blood pressure, go thank somebody. And I said, what? He said, better than pills, better than anything. If you want to lower your blood pressure, go express gratitude to somebody and your life changes. Tom, I can't thank you enough for sharing your time with us today. And I meant every word I said in the introduction. I thank you for being our mentor. It's been a long time since I first met you outside of farm in Vermont. And you've taught us all a lot along the way. So I appreciate and I thank you for that. And I'd also like to thank the Washington Speakers Bureau for supporting conversations like these and their commitment to holding dialogues that can help people create more inspired and, yes, more human teams. And thank you for watching. Hope to see you on the next episode.